Okie dokie. So we are live. Just going to give it a couple of seconds to kick in so that I know that I can actually hear what I'm doing. These things can be a little bit. Now then, yes, I think that is. Let me just tap that. Make sure I'm not muted. Now then, hopefully people can hear me. If you can hear me, just let me know. Oh, you can. Yeah, you can hear me. That's good. So I'm just going to remove that, and then I can see all of your questions here as well. So that is brilliant. So everything is working. Thank goodness, because we always have a bit of a worry when things don't work. Awesome. Thank you all so much for joining me today. We are going to be drawing these dog paws here. Now, they are quite small, I understand that, but we've got a couple of hours and I want to do something a little bit more detailed, I think, which is why we're not doing something, you know, large and speedily. So we're going to take our time a little bit with this. It's so nice to have so many people here, honestly, from all over the world. It's just amazing. It really, really is. Now, I've got all 4 dogs in with me this afternoon. So huge apologies if they... oh, Laura says she can't hear me. Laura, make sure you've got your... well, you won't be able to hear me. Everybody else can hear me. So I'm guessing, Laura, maybe you need to have a look at your sound settings. Yeah, it's definitely working. If you can't hear me, unfortunately, it's something to do with at your end, not this end. So I'm not going to worry about that. We're going to get cracking. Now, we've got a series of pencils that I've chosen. The paws are, we've sort of got the yellowy orangey colour coming down there, and then more of that sort of beigey, creamy colour on the bottom. I'm using a paper called Fabriano White. I've not used this paper before. It's just sort of like a smooth paper. We're not going to do a huge amount of layering, I don't think. I think we are... yeah, let me just pop something in the chat here. If you can't hear, check your mic. If it's, oops, if it's garbled, then it's likely your internet connection, unfortunately. I can't do anything about people's internet connections, I'm afraid. What I am going to do is just, oops, switch that onto, I'm not going to leave that as it is. Okay, so we're going to get cracking. And so when I first started thinking about how we were going to tackle these, was I going to come in and put the darks in first, or were we going to sort of start from the top and work down? And my instinct is telling me I just kind of want to put some of these darks in first. So we are going to start with my favourite dark sepia. I'm going to sharpen it. I'm going to make sure it's nice and sharp. We're just going to start working on some of these dark areas in between the paws. And the reason I'm doing this is because the rest of the piece is really quite light. And I think if we just get these in first, it's going to just kind of help us get going, really. Okay, so dark sepia, which is number 175. And we're just going to very, very gently, nice gentle pressure. We're just going to sort of almost sort of colour in the little space in between the toe here. So we're going to start with gentle pressure, so it's very, very, very gently going onto the surface of the paper there. And then I'm just going to increase my pressure slightly, and I'm going back up against what I've just drawn. I'm going back. The first one I put was this way. The second one, to make it darker, I'm going against it. I'm going up over the top of it. So I'm just going to get a little bit of dark in there. I'm going to get a little bit of dark in here. and in here. So there are all sorts of different ways of drawing, all sorts of different techniques. You'll find if you learn from different artists, you will learn one technique from one. Another might say, oh no, I don't use that technique, do this. And for me, it's about what works for you. So, you know, I think you should just sort of take all the techniques that you're given and use the ones that work for you. For me, that is the best way of learning. Sometimes something just doesn't click. It just doesn't, you know, it just doesn't work for you. So I'm just going to come over to this one as well. And this is what's happening here. We're using a different technique to start off with. And this is just so that we can get cracking, really get going. So just put that into there. Hang on. Yeah. Okay. Oops. Okay. So just coming down here a little bit as well. The problem with the internet is I can't control anything at your end, unfortunately, and I know that my sound is good because my just checking. Yeah, I can see my microphone's all working absolutely fine. So, and it's attached just underneath me as well, so it's not like it's far away. Although I will just double check. Oops. Yeah, it's the only one there, which is good. Okay. Right, so and then we're just going to come onto this little bit here as well. Just put a little bit of a holder in there. This one's got a bit more of a larger shadow coming down here, a larger space between those toes coming down here. And this just gets us going, you know. It's that initial stage where you're starting, where maybe you've got like a completely clean page, or you've got just got your line art down on there. You know, it's it can be really quite daunting just to actually get cracking, get started, and that's why just making a mark anywhere really on your page is a really good idea. Okay, so I think what I want to do now is just work a little bit on the toe. So for me, this area here is the most important bit for us today. The bits at the top there, they're a little bit out of focus, a little bit blurred. So we're going to work on those later. It's a very small piece, so it's not as if we're going to smudge them or anything like that. So I want to concentrate purely on these toes down here, because I don't want us to get to the end and then go, oh gosh, we haven't got any of the little claws or anything like that in. So that's what we're going to do, is concentrate down here, and then we'll put these bits in at the end. Okay, the colours that we've got. What I want to start off with is the raw umber 10%. Now, if you don't have the raw umber 10%, I'm just going to sharpen it very quickly. The raw umber 10% is a luminance colour. It's number 842. If you don't have that colour, you could use anything that's sort of similar. A warm grey 2, Polychromos warm grey 2 is similar, or a Polychromos warm grey 1. One's a little bit darker, one's a little bit lighter, and you could use one of those, or you could use something that's like, it's like a bit of a putty colour. It's a greeny grey. So if you're going to use a grey, use a warm grey, not a cool grey. And we're just going to use this, and we're going to start to sort of sketch in some of the hairs. Now, I don't want to spend ages and ages layering and layering and layering. So what I want to do is I want to keep my paper so that my paper aids with the texture of what it is that we're drawing. My outline is actually done with graphite, so I'm going to be kind of rubbing that out a little bit. And I do want to put a bit of a shadow in once we're finished as well. So we just need to bear that in mind too. And yeah, so I've got my raw umber 10%, and we're just going to start to kind of put some marks in, basically. So we're thinking dog paws. We're thinking the hair is short. It looks sort of relatively smooth. So my pencil strokes are going to be short. They're going to be little, short pencil strokes. And again, like I say, there are many different roads to Rome. You know, we could have done this on a different day and I'd colour the whole lot in and then put marks in over the top. It doesn't matter. There are lots and lots of different techniques and ways to get realistic looking fur. And what I want to do here is actually, it's almost like we're drawing every single tiny bit of fur. And we're not really. It's just that's kind of the technique. And we're just going to come down following the growth of the fur. As we come to the edge here, it does get a little bit blurry, so we can sort of fill that in a little bit more softly. But we're just going to come down very gently. The paws actually in the photograph are maybe a little bit lighter than what we've got here. But I think for today, I think using the raw umber 10% is quite a good bet. It's going to look it's going to look not particularly lovely for a little while. That's just a normal part of the process. But what I want you to do is really observe how the hair is growing. And if it kind of starts to go in a different direction, then that's the direction that you want your pencil strokes to be going in as well. If there's a bit of a curve, then I want your pencil strokes to be going in a bit of a curve. Obviously, there are an awful lot of elements that make something look realistic. But one of the main things is that your fur is the right length, particularly when drawing animals, that your fur is the right length. And your fur is also going in the direction of the growth. So we can see on this little toe here, we've got some hair kind of coming down this way. And then it starts to sort of kind of not curl over, but sort of lay over the other way. So it kind of comes down here and then it starts to just bend in a different direction as it just sort of curls over the top of this little nail here. And you can see there's a curve on it, and it actually starts to come down, so it's almost vertical. So we go from sort of vertical here, then it starts to just curl over, and then it starts to come back down to vertical, and you get those little hairs that just start to come over the top of the nail there. And I'm just going to rub out, I've just got my little Tombow here, I'm just going to rub out that little bit of graphite in there. And when you're drawing paws, that's a really important part of drawing paws, is getting the hair correct, because inevitably what will happen is you'll have the rest of the dog up here and you'll have done the face and all of that kind of stuff, and you get down to the paws, and usually what's happening is, if you're doing a portrait, the paws are actually coming out towards you. So getting the structure of the hairs and the growth of the hairs correct is going to really help in showing you and anybody who's looking at the portrait understanding that those legs are coming out. And that's a really important part of drawing paws, is to get that growth, the hair growth correct, especially when it comes over things like knuckles and all of that kind of stuff. So we're just going to keep coming down here. I've got a little bit of texture going on in the surface of my paper, but it's fine. I'm going to come down. And then we've just got to be mindful that we're going to be including at some point a bit of a shadow. So we can rub the line out if we want, but we don't have to. You know, the line that goes down here, because we're going to be putting a little bit of a shadow on there. And hopefully what we've now got is actually something that's looking, you know, pretty nice actually. We're going to come over the top and we're going to glaze some of the colours in over the top, but I want to just start to pull some more of this fur in. I always think when you're drawing something like this, the first sort of few pencil strokes, it's always a little bit sort of, you know, holding your breath moment. Especially when I'm drawing live to I don't know how many people. You know, it's a little bit holding your breath moment in that I never practice anything that I'm about to draw. I'm about to teach. I'm a little bit funny like that. I don't like to redraw something that I've already done. I have had a bit of a practice and a bit of a scribble with the colours and everything, but so there's always that little bit of a holding your breath moment you know, even if you're not teaching, even if you're just sort of starting to draw something. And that is very much about, it's just a human thing. But once you sort of get into it, it all starts to, you know, come together, and it ends up looking fab. So we're just using very, very light pressure. We're just a single pencil strokes at the minute. You can see I guess I'm working quite fast. I think that comes with confidence. The working a little bit faster as well enables your pencil strokes to be a bit freer. So you do end up with your pencil strokes looking or having a little bit more life and movement in them. If you work and there's nothing wrong with this, but if you work, I shouldn't put a but in there, should I? There's nothing wrong with this. If you work very slowly and very methodically and be very specific about where you're putting your pencil marks, you can lose a little bit of the movement and life in your drawings. And that's one of the reasons why whenever I start a piece, my work is a little bit more sketchy, because it just adds a little bit of life in there. Sometimes I have to stop myself from being quite sketchy. I'm doing a piece at the moment on drafting film, and I've had to really, really, really slow down, you know, just to make sure that everything's sort of working as it should. I'll just grab a bit of water there. Okay, so I am going to keep coming back into the chat. I might miss some questions, but if you do have a question, pop it in, and then if I get it, I'll be able to answer you. So we're just going nice and steady, nice gentle pressure, and just these sort of single pencil marks, as if we're drawing every single bit of fur, which we're not. We're just getting the texture in there basically, and then we're going to start to bring a little bit more of the values in. So really looking at where things need to be darker, where things need to be lighter. So I'm just coming down onto this bit here, and we can see that the hair starts to kind of move again, so it changes direction again a little bit. We've got a little bit of almost like a little curl there, and then we come down onto sort of like the bottom. It's just covering the bit of the pad there. Now I am just going to take out this little bit of graphite here. And when we put the shadow in, again, that's a really, really important part of if you're drawing, normally if you'd be drawing paws, you'd be drawing the whole dog, unless you're just drawing the paws, but you want to make sure that your piece is grounded, and that's why I want to put a shadow in today as well, and I can show you the best ways of getting a shadow in. It's really, really important, you know, that you don't leave your pieces floating. You know, they need to look like they're sitting on something, and adding a little bit of a shadow in is going to really, really help. So I'm going to give you a few tips on drawing that as well. So just coming down here, again, just using the raw umber 10%. It's a great colour, just very neutral, very, very useful for, you know, well, any kind of animals, any kind of portrait really. It's a really, really useful pencil. So just coming down here nice and gently. Don't worry if your hairs start to get a little bit messed up. They are a little bit messed up. There are a few that are a little bit darker and a little bit lighter, and we're going to come back in and sort out those values and everything. I just want to sort of bring almost like a bit of an initial layer, a base layer, but incorporate the texture and everything in there as well. And it just gives us something to work with. Okay, right, so I'm going to come down this side here. Again, I'm just going to take a little bit of that. Okay, so next week we're doing a tiger's eye, and I've done that on, we're going to do that on drafting film, because I want to really demonstrate how to use subtraction techniques with the slice tool and everything. This week we've just got the Tombow. So this bit here, we're going to bring some of the orange in. So just let this top bit here just drift off. Try not to draw a big straight line. If you work in sections with your drawings, wherever you finish a section, try not to finish it on a straight line. It's much harder then to sort of connect the sections together. You know, just make sure that you've got sort of like a nice soft finish, and that's all to do with your pressure. So having a really great toolbox of pressure is I think is one of the fundamentals of good colour pencil work. So being able to use very light pressure, medium pressure, dark pressure, heavy pressure, and all of the other little tiny increments of pressure along the way as well is a really, really useful tool to have. It just means that you can, you know, you're going to be able to sort of identify and react to all of the little tiny differences in values as you're working along by using different pressure. So you can use the same pencil but have a dark area, a light area, a medium area, and you know, just practice your pressure. And that in itself, just practicing your pressure, that in itself is going to help you develop your colour pencil work. Okay, so we're going to do one pour at a time. So again, we're just these little tiny pencil marks. And like I say, there's all sorts of different ways to be able to do this. You know, lots and lots of different techniques. This is just how I've decided to do it today. Again, just really watching how the hairs are growing. I'm just coming down here, bring a little bit of colour into there. And again, we've got this bit of hair coming down here. So again, being very, very purposeful about the direction that your hairs are growing in. And then we've got a little bit of it's almost like a little parting there. Even being really conscious about the hair growth is going to make a massive impact on your drawings. Okay, good. Right, so I'm going to now come back with the dark sepia. What sepia? Yeah, the dark sepia and the I'm going to use a little bit of the sepia 10%. So a little bit confusing because they're both sort of called the same thing. We've got dark sepia, which is a very dark grey in the polychromos range, which is 175. And then we have the percent colour from the sepia in the luminance range, which is the 902. This is the 10%, which is like a bit of a purpley colour. If you look at the full strength sepia in the luminance range, it's like a rich brown. But there's obviously some purpley tones in there, and the sepia 10% is a really, really great colour. So do these strokes cover the whole area or does white show through? So you can, mine's got a little bit of white showing through, so don't worry if you've got a bit of white showing through. That can help with the texture. Otherwise we'd just sort of be colouring it all in. So I quite like to have a little bit of that white showing. So we're going to work with the sepia 10% next. It's a bit of a purpley colour. We're just going to start to work into the little bits in between the toes. So we've got this very dark area here, which is the shadow. And then I've got quite a sharp pencil. We're going to be really specific in bringing this sort of purpley bit in here. I like using the sort of the purpley colours in my work. It doesn't show as purple. It's actually works really, really nicely. So we're just going to come down here. We're going to increase that little bit of a shadow, and you can see my pencil marks are starting to go backwards and forwards, just so we get a nice area of colour in there. Oops. My daughter, she's gone on holiday, and she hasn't replied to any of my texts for like 24 hours, and now she's decided she wants to reply to all of them. Okay, so we've got that nice little bit of a shadow in there, which we've increased slightly, and then we're going to come onto this side as well, and we're just going to increase this bit of a shadow in here too. So you can see I'm just going very, very tiny little pencil marks. We're just going to increase this bit of a shadow. We'll probably darken it a little bit more. And then I'm just going to start to bring some of these little shady bits through. When you've got a paw that's this colour or anything that's this colour, it can be quite challenging to work out how dark the darks are. And inevitably what happens is we make it an awful lot lighter than what it is. And it's something that I think many of us struggle with, me included. It's really quite tricky to work out how dark your darks need to be. So we're just going to go nice and steady, and we can go in and we can darken them up a little bit more. So you can see I've just pulled this little bit of a shadow out. We've got this bit that's coming down here against the against this little bit of a toe here. And I'm working downwards. But when I work with the shadows, I like to go up, and it kind of consolidates it in my brain that it's a shadow and it's going up in between hairs. Down here as well. Let's just bring a little bit of that in. So it's very specific pencil work. And what we want to do is we want to create something that looks 3D, that looks like it's sort of coming out of the paper. And we're going to do that by really concentrating on the darks and the lights, so that we've got the structure in there, the structure correct. Oh, Teresa, there isn't an alternative polychromos for the sepia 10%. So I would use probably a warm grey 4. That's what I would use. It's the same sort of value. Okay, so let's just come back up here. So I'm just going to bring these little fur strokes up here. And what you'll find with the initial lay down of that raw umber 10%, what you'll find is that you've got it's smooth, but the pencil will pick up on the texture that the pencil underneath it has laid down. So you'll actually start to get a little bit of texture coming in, or where you're putting your luminance, it will start to pick up on the texture that's underneath it, specifically for these little shadowy bits here. And your pencil will sort of just fill in the grooves or move with it, almost like it's a mini indent that you've put in. And that's just because of the pigment and how it works on the paper. So we've got quite a nice little area of shadow going on in there. It might look really, really dark, but actually it's probably correct. I'm going to come over to this side now, and we're going to bring a little bit of the shading into here. So on the edge here, it's actually very smooth. So I'm now using the sepia 10%, but I'm using it in little round pencil strokes. So if you use tiny pencil strokes in a round way, so just round and round, very nice light pressure, you're going to get a very smooth lay down of colour. So if you're working on a piece and there isn't any detail, you can't see any hair detail, this is a really good way of filling in areas where you've got colour value but you've got no actual fur detail in there, and it's just going to give you a nice smooth lay down. This tends to work for most surfaces. On this paper it's working quite nicely. I'm getting a very, very nice subtle lay down of the sepia 10%. It's looking nice and smooth. This is going to work also for pastel matte. It's going to work for your vellums and your bristles and all of that kind of stuff. When it comes to drafting film, it is going to work, but you've got to be very specific about where you put your pencil marks. With more traditional surfaces, you do tend to get a nice lay down. So I'm just going to kind of come on there. That's all very smooth. And then we're going to bring the shadow into there. And then what we can do is we can just increase our pressure a little bit, and we can start to work on this bit of a shadow on the edge of the paw here. And again, we want to be really, really mindful of the direction of the hairs, because that again is going to really give us the structure. So just coming down here. So we've got this smooth bit, which is sort of slightly out of focus, and then we come a little bit more into focus where we can see some of those hair details in there. And again, we've just got to be really, really careful about how these hair details are working down here. We've got a little bit more orange in there as well. I'm going to put some burnt ochre into there when I've created this little shadow. So just being really nice and gentle. I've had no heavy pressure on here at all. It's just all nice, gentle pencil work. It's coming up there. Ooh, I think I need to sneeze. The paper I'm using is it's called Fabriano White. It's the first time I've used it, so let's hope it behaves. It came in a pad format. What size is it? About A3 size, sort of 11 by 15 or something like that. It's just sort of like a smooth surface, and it's quite thick, and yeah, it's working okay at the minute. I'm not the biggest fan of smooth papers, but this actually is working quite nicely. I haven't put a huge amount of layers or anything on it, but you know, we'll see how it works. So down at the bottom here, I'm just going to go back in the opposite direction, and as we come across, so we've got the quite large shadow here. As we come across, I'm going to bring those little sort of hair marks through into this bit here. So there's a little bit of hair that's sort of creeping and curling across. I'm then going to use my sepia 10% just to bring in that tiny little bit of a shadow so that we can sort of see, or make it look like that hair is sort of hanging over the top of the claw there. And then I'm just going to come down here and just darken this little bit here as well. So we've got a little bit of hair just coming down here. And then when we bring the shadow in a little bit later, again, we're going to kind of work up and underneath where the shadow is going in between hairs, and that's going to give us an idea of the shadow going in between those hairs. So I'm just going to use a little bit more in here. That shadow. A little bit more in there. Okay, and then being careful not to do too much on those paler areas, you know, because we do want to sort of see a difference, and we do want that nice idea of it being a structure rather than a flat object. Okay, so let's come down onto this paw again. We've got some orangey bits in there, which I think will probably stick with the oranges to bring those like an apricot-y colour. So I'm going to use the burnt ochre for that. But I just want to bring a little bit of the, a little bit more of the texture in with this darker colour for now, the sepia 10%, just so that we've got an idea of the texture of the fur coming down. So not everywhere, just sort of gently bringing in an idea of that structure. Okay, and then let's just come down here as well. So we don't want to fill it with this sort of pale purpley colour, but we do want to just pick up on some of these little hair strokes. So it's quite precise, careful work. Always thinking about the hair growth and the shaping of the hair as well. So when I put my pencil strokes down, it's very much about the pressure. So where you start, it tends to be slightly heavier pressure than where you end. And where you end, it just sort of lifts off. So you'll see me sort of working in quite a fluid motion. And where it lifts off, it just sort of tapers off. So you get that sort of hair-like feel, rather than it being sort of like just a solid line. And then again, when I come down to the bottom here, I'm going to go from the bottom up and curl it round. So we've got an idea of how that fur is sort of working, curling around the bottom there, that little pad, which will be behind it. Okay, it's coming down here. Again, we've got these little wispy bits done from the bottom and then gone up. And I just want to sort of show the hair just coming around a little bit. Okay, and then go onto this side here. Again, just bringing in an idea of the little hairs in here. The only thing with doing work like this that's sort of quite small and the motions are quite small, you can get a little bit of cramp in your fingers. So it's a good idea just to sort of open and shut your hand. Do I use anything to lean on to prevent smudging? Yeah, so I would always recommend using something under your hand. I haven't here, but I tend to use glassine paper. So put glassine paper under your hand. The other thing as well is when you're drawing, if you find that you're smudging an awful lot, just look at how you're drawing. Are you drawing and is your hand moving as you're drawing, or is your wrist static on your surface and it's just your pencils working? If you find that your wrist is moving, that's one of the reasons why you get a lot of smudgy marks and everything on your surface. So my fingers my wrist is static and it's just my fingers that move. So that's, again, something to sort of think about if you're having trouble with, you know, messy marks. Just look at how your hand is working and not necessarily change anything up if everything else is working for you, but just make sure that you, you know, don't have something, you're not resting on a piece of your work that you're then moving your hand around on and smudging. So it could be that you just sort of, you know, reanalyze how you're going to work through a piece. Okay, so we're just going to come down here. You can see I put this little tiny sort of shadow in here that shows there's another toe behind there, and we're just going to come down here as well, just shade that in. So again, I'm just going round and round with my pencil, nice light pressure down. Down to here actually. And then I'm just going to bring some more of these little lines in here. So this is, I guess, you know, it's a simple technique. Certainly techniques that I would use, you know, if I'm drawing a commission or a portrait where I've got paws and everything like that. But it is very much, the techniques I use are very much dictated as to how I'm feeling, the subject matter, the colours that I'm using, the surface that I'm using. It's all got a huge part to play in which technique I decide to use on the specific day. So there's no right or wrong technique. It's just what you decide to use, and if it's working. I mean, if it's not working, then it's a good idea to change. That's always a good idea. So again, here we've got this sort of little parting in here. Just bring a few of those little hairs in there as well. Okay, so we've actually got a paw that's now starting to look quite, you know, realistic. It's definitely not flat. It's got a bit of life to it. And now what I want to do is I just want to bring in a little bit of that orange. So it's the burnt ochre. The polychromos burnt ochre, which is the 187. Now, what you'll find when you've been working with the luminance very, very gently, and then you come to work with a polychromos, you might find that the colour is a little bit stronger, which is weird because the polychromos is less opaque than the luminance. But when you're using very light pressure, and you've got the lighter colours of the luminance, you don't get as much colour coming through. So it's really key to watch your pressure when you then swap from one pencil to another, because they do feel different. And I just want to bring a little bit of this orange. I'm just going to bring a little bit of orange into here. So I've moved my hand right back. You can see I've moved it right back. The pencil's actually sitting in that crook of my my forefinger and my thumb there. Whereas before I was very much like that right up to the end. So I was very specific with my mark making there. So now I'm very much sort of back there. So I can't exert an awful lot of pressure. So I'm just going to just gently glaze in. So this is a glazing technique where you just bring a colour in over the top of what you've got. It doesn't disturb any of the texture that you've got in there. It doesn't have a huge effect on the colour that you've got down, as in it's not going to mix that much with the colour. And it's just going to give us this nice sort of gentle apricot-y colour that we want in here. This is what I love about coloured pencils, is the fact that, you know, you've got the ability to get a really dark, strong colour and then a very, very, very pale colour just by changing your pressure. So very gentle down here. We're just going to bring it down here. And we've got a little bit of that orange down here as well. Mine's looking a little bit, I think it's the surface, to be honest. It's looking a little bit like I've done a load of cross hatches. So what I've done now is, can you see how I've just moved my fingers back up? I felt I needed a little bit more control when I got to this bit, and I actually wanted to be very specific about bringing this little bit of orange in on the side of the foot here. So again, it's all, I guess for me, it's a little bit more instinctive now. I'm like, oh, it just happens, you know, without me having to put a huge amount of thought into it. But as I'm going through a piece, I will know, oh, I just need to put a little tiny bit of pressure in here, or I need to be much more specific with what I'm doing here. And that is around how I'm holding my pencil and the pressure that I'm using. And if, you know, practicing that so it kind of becomes second nature is a really, really good way. You know, it's really good to be able to have that when you're drawing, because you can just sort of pick up on, I need this, or I need this, or I need that. So I'm just going to bring a little bit of that orange into that corner there of the toe. I'm also going to bring a little bit of the burnt ochre orangey colour down into here as well. Okay, and then we're going to bring a little bit onto the top of the paws here. In fact, I'm probably going to bring a little bit of this orange in from the top here now, just so that we can sort of connect it. So I'm just going to go nice and gently. I'm going to keep my pencil on the surface of the paper, and I'm just going to shade in that top bit there. We can see that the general direction of the fur is sort of that way. It's out of focus, but we can kind of see the general direction. And then when we get a little bit closer down, we can start to be a bit more specific. Just so we've got a little bit of that colour in there, and then we'll obviously need to come back to it. But then what we can do is we can actually start to come down into this area here and be more specific about the colour that we're bringing in. So I'm going to bring a little bit more of that burnt ochre in. Just going to see if I can get rid of that line there. And then as we come down, we can then start to bring some of these little hairlines. Again, being really nice and gentle. Got a little bit of hair that's sort of lifted there. Bring a little bit into there. And then again, I'm just going to go backwards, up and under, just to create some of these little sort of shadowy areas. Be careful not to go over the top with these little shadowy areas, otherwise you're going to end up with the same mark everywhere, and it's going to look very structured, very contrived, very sort of picket fence like. So you bring these little areas in, but they need to be random, and they also need to be going in the right direction. So I'm just working through there. And then I'm just going to bring a little bit more of that orange onto this side here. Down here. Nice and gently. Okay, a bit more of that orange in here. So you can see I'm using it very, very, very gently. They are pale paws. Let's bring a little bit of that burnt ochre up into here. Again, I'm just using it at the line going upwards, just so I create a little bit of a shadowy effect. And then let's just darken up here. And then we can start to think about bringing some of the claws in, just so we've got a different element, and then we can tidy up around the bottom as well. I always find with claws, less is more, so trying to just get it so that they just look like a claw and then leaving it rather than, putting too much effort in. So just bring a little bit more up into here, just a bit stronger pressure. Nice and gently. We get a little bit brown into there as well at some point. Again, I want my pencil marks to sort of almost create the texture. So it's not about trying to draw every single fur line. It's definitely around creating the texture. And that's what I want to achieve, rather than having lots and lots of details. Okay, just going to come down down here a little bit more and just strengthen this orange here a little bit. And then again, once we've got this in, we can then bring the brown in, the walnut brown, and we can glaze in over different parts of the orange just to darken and strengthen as well. Oh yeah, no, it's not burnt orange, it's burnt ochre. Sorry if I said it was burnt orange. I don't think I did, but I'm likely to say anything, to be honest. And if you ask me to tell you what numbers they are, I'll read it off the thing, and I'm likely to get that wrong as well. This one is 187. So just get that little bit up, going up there, and then we don't have to go crazy with the details or anything. I think it's always a good idea as well, when you're starting a piece, to kind of think about the techniques that you're going to use maybe before you actually start, and almost rehearse it, do a mental rehearsal. So I used to talk about it, and I still do talk about it, being visualizing. So I'm a very visual person, and I'll visualize everything that I do before I do it. But actually the words mentally rehearsing, I think, mean a little bit, I think they have a better, people have a better understanding, I think. So you can mentally rehearse how you're going to do something, which techniques you're going to use. And if you get really good at it, it's amazing. It really helps with practice. It helps with dexterity. It helps with all of that. It just helps with development if you can get really good at mentally rehearsing anything that you do in life. Okay, so we've got the walnut brown now, which is the 177. Colleen, slip of the tongue. I'm always having slip of the tongues, Colleen. It hasn't yet put me in hot water, but I'm sure one of these days it will. Okay, so I've got the walnut brown now, and again we're going to just use that little bit of a glazing technique. So I just want to bring a little bit of that brown in here, nice and gently in over the top of that orange. You don't want to be using hard pressure. We're just bringing a little bit of those shadowy areas in there. I'm using a walnut brown for my shadows in here because I do want it to be that sort of orangey brown. I don't want the colour to sort of disappear, and actually the walnut brown in over the top of the burnt ochre is going to work quite nicely. You could use something like, you could use a complementary or a split complementary colour. A green could work, particularly if you've got if you were drawing this dog and it was sitting on grass, then green in the oranges is going to work really nicely. And you can use sort of purples. I tend not to go with the direct complementary colour for orange, which is blue, because it can go green. Obviously when you put green on orange, it doesn't go green, it kind of mixes and you get the sort of the shadowy colour. But that's something to be really mindful of, is, you know, what colours are you actually using to mix. Okay, so I'm just going to come down here a little bit again, just gently bringing in those little shadowy areas in there. Going through there. I've actually got a very small, very simple colour theory free download coming. I think the end of this month, I think it's coming out. Just to sort of give a bit of an idea. I mean, it's very simple. Colour theory can be incredibly complicated, but it's just to give a little bit of an idea and a little bit of help around colour theory and what to use and what not to use. Okay, just bring a little bit into there. I don't want to make it too brown, but you can see we've got a nice little shadow on there now. Actually, I'm just going to use my burnt ochre again. I'm just going to bring a little bit of fluffiness onto the edge there. Edge of that little foot there. And then I'm going to bring a little bit more of that orange down into here. And then what we're going to do is just look at bringing some of those little nails in so that we can finish off down here. So nails, actually really, really nice to draw, usually curved. Be careful that you don't follow your line arts exactly, because they might be a little bit pointy like that. So just work with what you've got on your reference photo. If we look at the colours of this one, we've got pink. So we have the cinnamon. Okay, Donna, so when you say don't worry about every individual hair but work on texture, you see, it sounds like I'm gone completely bonkers, because I'm saying don't bring every single tiny little hair out but work on texture. We're working with pencils that have got a very fine point that actually are probably the same width as a hair. So actually, if our pencil strokes bring in the texture to begin with, it looks like we're drawing every single tiny little bit of hair in, but that's not what I want you to concentrate on. I want you to concentrate on the texture, not every single hair. If you start to concentrate on every hair, you become really bogged down with trying to get every hair in the right place. That's not what I want you to do. I just want you to concentrate on the texture. Hopefully that makes sense. So we've got cinnamon, which is 189, which is that pinky colour that we're going to be looking at. We have got brown ochre 10%, which is the 832. which is part of that sort of yellowy browny colour. And then a little bit of the orange and a little bit, probably a little bit of walnut brown as well. We're going to take it nice and steady. And we're going to start with the cinnamon. So nice and sharp. 189. And we're just going to start down in this bit down here. So I'm going to be really, really careful about watching my line art, because my line art's a bit dodgy here. And it's sort of the nail sort of starts a little bit higher up. So I'm just going to gently draw in a little bit of a nail there. And then it sort of curves around. Gently curve that around. And then it sort of curves that way. That's a better shape than I got in there. And it goes up there. And it sort of comes, this is where it comes from, the nail bed's up here somewhere. Okay, so we've got a nice little shape in there. And then what I want to do is I just want to bring the pinky colour, so the cinnamon, I'm just going to bring that up into the, just a few little lines, just to show that there's like that pinky bit underneath. And then we're just going to very gently shade in the edge, this pinky edge here. But I almost want a bit of a curve in the shade. Because the nail is curved, it goes around. So I almost want my shading line to have a bit of a curve on it. Okay, so that's the pinky bit down there. I'm just going to take it there a little bit. And then I'm going to use my brown ochre, 10%. I need to sharpen it. So this isn't sharp enough. This is too blunt. That's going to cause us to cry if we go a little bit wrong. So I'm just going to sharpen this. My pencil sharpener, by the way, as well, I have a, do you know, I always used to think, goodness me, why do people have electric sharpeners? How silly. And then I got an electric sharpener, and I will never not have an electric sharpener. I absolutely adore my electric sharpener. It's called a Swordfish Multipoint, and it just sits on my desk. It's quite big, and I literally just shove my pencil in, and within about 2 seconds it's sharp, and I love it. The only problem is if you forget to empty it, and then it gets crammed full of shavings, and then your pencils start breaking because it just gets too full. And then when you empty it, it goes everywhere, and that's the only issue I've ever had. So I've now got the brown ochre 10%, and we're just going to come onto this edge here. So we're going to bring this yellowy browny colour in here. Again, just nice and gently. And just bringing that in there. And you can bring the brown ochre in over the top of your pinky colour as well, the cinnamon as well, if you wish. You know, it's gonna mix quite nicely, and we can also just strengthen that that pinky colour as well. Hilary, what's my best advice for practicing to get the natural hair marks down, to not have them all look in the same length? You often say it's good pencil work. Is this what you mean? Yeah. So Hilary, what I would say is practice being a bit loose with your pencil work, not in any other part of your life, just with your pencil work. Practice being a little bit looser. So I don't know whether you can see my hand here where I'm sort of moving it around a little bit. Practice fluid pencil marks so that you can sort of whisk your hairs in if you need to, so that you can be really specific if you need to. But having that dexterity with your pencil, being able to move it around, and being able to really change your pressure up, so being so comfortable with your pencil that it feels like an extension of your hand, that is what's going to start giving you some really, really, really nice marks when you put it down the paper. If you're very specific and your pencil marks are always very sort of straight, and there's no life in them, there's no curve, there's no fluidity in your pencil strokes, then that's when your fur is going to start looking a little bit lifeless. You know, and it is practice, you know, and it's just about, it's practicing the right things, isn't it? You know, so, okay, so I'm going to come back in with my cinnamon on this side here. And we're just going to come over this side again, so make that a little bit stronger pink. Again, I'm just going to come up through into there under the fur. Okay, and then I'm going to bring a little bit of the walnut brown in. And I'm just going to bring a little bit of the walnut brown onto the edge here. So we've got sort of like the yellowy colour, the pinky colour, and then we've got a little bit of that sort of stronger brown. Coming down there as well. I'm going to have a shadow, which again is going to really help. So just a little bit of that brown in there. And then I'm going to bring my brown ochre 10% back in over the top of that brown and just blend it out. So we've got a little bit of smudge of colour, but it's, you know. Okay. And then when we come to put the shadow in, that's going to make quite a big difference. I'm just going to use the sepia 10% here as well and just sort of strengthen the shadow around here so it's not too pale. And in here as well, it just kind of comes down. The thing with smoother paper is you do need a sort of a few layers in here and you know, for it, because sometimes it can go a little bit like nothing's blending properly. So I'm just going to just bring a few more little bits in there. Okay. Right, so we'll come on to this one here. Again, I'm just going to use that cinnamon. Oops. Just dropping all my pencils. Ooh. Okay, so I'm going to use the cinnamon again in here. So again, just really watching the shape of my little claw there. Get that one rubbed out too. So I'm just going to come down around. You want that connection between the foot and the claw, so it has to look like it's coming from here, you know, not just sort of like a little extension. Well, it is an extension of, but and then we're just going to come down. This claw is more facing forwards, more so than the other one. I'm just going to bring a little bit of that in there. Again, I've left some little highlighty bits in there too. And then I'm going to use the brown first of all. And I'm just going to sharpen my brown, walnut brown there. I'm going to bring a little bit of that walnut brown in here. A little bit in there. It's just sort of some lines. To just go. Through there. I'm just going to bring a little bit of that brown on the edge there. And then I'm going to use my brown ochre 10%. Oh, which broke when it fell on the floor. Again, over the top of those browns, so it just sort of blends them a little bit. I'm just going to bring that walnut brown back in again. These are really, really tiny little nails, so it's just a case of you know, getting it kind of right and then leaving it. I'm just going to bring a little bit into there as well, very gently. Okay. Let's get that bit pinkiness in there. And then let's work on this one here. So the pinky colour again. And then I'm going to use the brown ochre 10% on the bottom. pinky on the top. Good. Okay, a little bit of brown on the bottom there, but we're going to get a little bit of shadow in there as well. Very, very gentle pressure. And then I'm just going to use that walnut brown. And in there, a little bit more of that walnut brown in there as well, just to darken that. And in here. Good, right, okay. So I just want to, I'm going to use my sepia 10%. I'm just going to bring a little bit more detail and sort of value into this little area here. And then we'll start on the other paw, and then I want to just get that shadow in. In fact, we might do the shadow first on this one. So this is the sepia 10% that I'm using here. Okay, right, so let's talk shadows just for a minute. Okay, I think shadows are something that really can challenge people, because putting it, once you've drawn something and then it's like, oh, I've got to put a shadow in, or you know, you have a critique with me and I say this is amazing but you really need to get a shadow in, or whatever, you know, to ground your piece. What can be really scary is when you look at a shadow like this, it looks really, really dark, and it can be really, really quite scary. So the best thing to do is to start off nice and gently and nice and light. Now, for the purpose of this, I'm actually going to use the warm grey 4, depending, and I'm just going to sharpen it because I've got a bit of a funny end on mine. Depending on what surface you use, this is a smooth paper. Creating a shadow on drafting film is going to be your worst nightmare. Because you want to create something really, really nice and smooth, and it's really hard to get smooth on drafting film. On pastel mat, it's a dream, because of course you can smudge it and it all works really, really well. But I find start off nice and gently and light, and kind of build it up. But with your shadow, don't think it's just it's like a background. I always used to think back, oh, I just whack a background in, it'd be great. My backgrounds take longer than my actual subject half the time. So it's a case of being really, really nice and gentle, and there has to be a connection. And I find the easiest way to start with a shadow is somewhere where we can really see it becoming a shadow. So I'm not going to start up here. I'm actually going to start down around the little toe areas here. We also have to think about the plane of what it's lying on. This is actually taken from above, so it's a little bit different than if you've got a dog pointing towards you. But you've got to think about the plane, so it's got to be the same plane throughout. You can't sort of change it, go on an angle or whatever. So I would normally start in an area like this where it's quite dark. You know, so we don't have to sort of think about, oh gosh, I need it. We are going to go quite nice and light, but I know it's quite dark in here. Probably going to put a little bit of black in there and darken it even more. And I'm going to use very, very light pressure, and I'm just going to go backwards and forwards and just shade. So it's like I'm using a graphite pencil and I'm just shading, coming around that little claw like that. You can see it definitely needs to be darker once we're done, but we're going to start off with it sort of relatively light. That way it doesn't scare us so much. And then when we come down here, I'm going to come and we're going to follow the shadow that's actually given in the photograph. We're not going to make our own shadow up. If at all possible, use the shadow that you're given. If there isn't a shadow in the picture, well, there will be, but sometimes it's sort of disguised with a background or something, leaves or something like that the animal's sitting on. If you can't see a shadow, look at the light direction in the photograph. Is it coming from the top? Is it coming from the side? Is it coming from the back? You should be able to find somewhere where you know, you can actually sort of see where the shadow's coming from. But you always need to work with the lighting that you've got in your photo. So when we come underneath this little nail here, we've got a lighter area underneath it. And then we've actually got the shadow of the nail. So it's a little bit darker. So can you see how I was kind of wriggling my pencil around just to get that nice softness? So it's not a big, strong mark. It's just a nice fuzzy softness. And it's light enough that if I think this is pants, I can delete it. I can rub it out. So I would always start nice and gently and light and kind of go, oh yeah, this is working now. I can start to strengthen this up a little bit. So here, where we've got it sitting underneath the paw here where there's fur, again, we can just go up and underneath. So we can really get a feeling of that fur coming down and around, and the texture of the fur coming over and the hairs coming over. So just nice and gently. This is the warm grey 4 I'm using here. Okay, so that's gone down quite nicely. So I'm going to be really brave and use I think I'm going to use my dark sepia rather than the black. So the dark sepia is the 175. Can I ask what polychromos colour you'd use if you don't have cinnamon? Yes, I'd probably use something like a, it's not the same at all. It's very much lighter. But can you see here the beige red? It used to be called Light Flesh. It's 132. It is very much lighter, but that will work nicely for you, I think. Okay, so dark sepia, and I'm just going to come in here because I'm like, yep, that shadow's working quite nicely now. Let's just darken this off a little bit. So we've got a bit of a layer in there now, so we should be able to get sort of quite a nice dark colour coming through there. Now, the trick now is to not just have a big black blob, but it is to gently have a graduation. So again, it's all about your pressure. So you get a little bit stronger pressure here. Just going to darken this little bit in here as well, actually. Let's darken that up a bit. You've got the hair coming down here. So you've got this big, strong bit of a shadow here. Probably going to have to give it a little bit of welly in there. And then as you're coming down, just lighten your pressure off. So you've got this graduation coming through. And then it tends to be a little bit darker right on the, you know, underneath the actual subject there. That tends to be a little bit darker. And again, we can bring those little fur strokes in there. A little bit darker in there. And then it just becomes lighter and it just sort of peters out. I've got a bit of a shadow in there. Now, if you've got a cotton bud or something like that, you could see if it all blend. I'm not sure whether it will on. I'm not sure whether it will on this paper, but it might just blend a little bit. Does a little bit, but not much. On pastel mat, it's gonna blend a lot. And then I'm just going to take my warm grey 4 again. I'm just going to bring a little bit, just a little tiny bit in there, just that we've got that. And then down here. So your light source is really, really important. So we're just going to come down and we're going to bring a little bit down this area down here as well. So again, I'm just going to go in with the warm grey 4. Shadows are a really, really important part of any portrait that has a full body and you're not drawing a background. You've got to have it you've got to have your pieces grounded. So what's this? Matt, would you use other pencils to blend? Yes, you can. Yes, absolutely. So I just tend to use my pencils to blend. When it so I would sort of use a lighter color on here to blend these out, or something like a cotton bud or something like that. I don't tend to use hot press papers just because you do need to add a little bit stronger pressure as you're sort of working through, which I'm not a fan of. But yeah, I just use sort of like probably on hot press paper I'd probably use things like luminance, something like that, that's a little bit softer. So you can see that the shadow here is nice. It's coming down here. We can see it's not strong enough, but at least it's a nice start. So trying to keep it on that sort of even. And it is important to sort of just, you know, take your time a little bit with it. Plot it out first and then go back and work on it. So we're just going to come around this area here, which we can see again is really dark. And then we've got this extra sort of bit of a shadow that kind of comes off here. Okay. And then again, we can just use the dark sepia. I'm going to start down on this bottom bit here. Probably not do all of that shadow there. We're going to move on to the second paw. And I'm just going to go upwards for those little shadowy areas in there. And then we've got sort of quite a strong line coming down here. And that dark shadow in. Just take it nice and steady because you don't want to end up with a big, strong, sharp outline around your shadow. You want it to blend off. You want it to, you know, just sort of peter out. And that's going to come with your pencil pressure. Put that in there. This needs to be darker still. So I'm just going to add a little bit more pressure in there. And then gently backwards and forwards. Just get a little bit going up here. And then we'll move on to that second foot, second paw. And just by adding the shadow, it just adds, you know, an extra dimension. And then of course you've just got to, you know, work with your shadow just so you get that nice soft edge. Okay, gently. So I think that's working quite nice. Again, you know, you can use a bit of a cotton bud. I've got some different kinds here. The softer one actually works a little bit better. You can just sort of smooth off those edges, which is quite nice. Okay, and then is there a reason why I use different brands of white pencils? Yeah, they are really not the same. So if I take, I might have, yeah. So if I take a few different brands of white pencils, hold on, I've got a ton here. God, how many white pencils have I got here? And let me just tell you about all of these white pencils. Right, okay. Actually, this is a really interesting part. So here we go. Here are a load of white pencils. Okay. This one here, Polychromos white. That one I never use, ever, really. unless I'm doing something like whiskers or something like that on hot press paper, but I tend to not use polychromos white at all. It's not opaque. It has a resist. So if you use it and then you try and draw over the top of it with another colour, it's really difficult and you get some really weird like little marks. So my polychromos white, I think it is almost brand new and I never use it. My Pablo white, this is just in a pencil extender. My Pablo white here is probably my favourite white. It's opaque. It's used with a sharp point, particularly on pastel mat, works beautifully over the top of other colours to get like quite a clean, crisp white. It's got velvety lay down and it doesn't tend to have a resist. So this tends to be my favourite white. Very, very different to the polychromos white. The luminance white here, opaque, quite soft. So when you, even if you sharpen it and you try and get it over the top of other colours, sometimes you have to press a little bit too hard. So inevitably then what happens is the white mixes with the colour underneath and that's when you get like a milky colour. You know, when you put your whites down and it goes like a bit of a bluey grey or whatever. That's because, just because of how the pigment works. It's a good opaque white. So, you know, if you want to use it on your work, then you can, whether it'll, but it is opaque. So it does have good coverage. Just bring a little bit into the claws there. The Museum Aquarelle white, again, one of my favourite whites, used with a sharp point, really good for getting those sort of like white hairs in over the top. You can also use it wet. So you can just dab the end, either dab it on your tongue, it's completely non-toxic. You can dab it on the end of your tongue. You know, if you want like a little highlight in an eye or on a tongue or something like that, this is a really good pencil for it. I used this one when I did the Camage horses with all the water and everything. And then Holbein. Oh my goodness. So the Holbein soft white. It has a little warning on it, which you need to adhere, because if you don't, it'll just break. So use a knife to sharpen. Of course, you use a knife to sharpen and it looks like some, I don't know, somebody's been gnawing it. This is an awesome, 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 awesome white. It's really thick. It's like, it's just so soft. We'd say in Yorkshire, it's claggy. It's a really soft, claggy pencil. This white is awesome, and I've been using it on my drafting film piece that I'm working on at the minute, and I can get this white over the top of the layers, and I can get it to kind of blend things a little bit, and I can get things to shine. So this is an awesome, awesome white. This is the soft white. It's highly opaque. It's highly light fast. You must use a knife to sharpen it, because if you don't, it's just going to break. But this is a really good white. And then I have the Derwent Drawing Chinese white. Again, very, very soft white. This is another really, really good white. Very opaque, very soft. So all of those whites, bar the polychromos white, I use and are good whites. So hopefully that helps. Right, let's make a start on this this second little paw here. So I'm going to go back in with my, what time are we on? Oh gosh, right, okay. So we're going to go back in with my raw umber, and we're just going to start to bring all of the little the hairlines in down here. Got a little bit of a shadow on that side as well, which will be fine. So we're going back to those little hairlines. So it's not that we're drawing every hair, it's that we're capturing the texture. And that, for me, is a really important part of realism, you know, capturing the texture of whatever it is that you're drawing. You want to be able to capture silky fur, you know, if you're drawing like a spaniel ear or something like that, you want to be able to capture the silkiness, the softness and the curls and everything. You might be drawing a border terrier, and then you want your texture to really showcase that very, you know, coarse fur, lots of fur going all over the place. Labrador, something like that, you want to be able to capture the smoothness, the short, the sleek fur, and you do that with I would do that with my pencil stroke straight away. Sometimes, you know, there isn't any fur to capture, there isn't any sort of texture to capture. So if you're drawing a black Labrador, for example, and it's got a very shiny head, but you can't really see the fur strokes, then you would just go with nice smooth lay down of your pencils. You wouldn't need to showcase any of that fur. And if you remember that the more fur lines you put in, so when you finish your work, the more lines that you put in to represent fur, the more textured your animal is going to be. A really, really important factor. So the horse I'm drawing at the moment is you can't see any of the hairlines. It's super smooth, very short summer coat. So I'm not showing really any of the fur lines. It's all just smooth, and it's just all around, you know, the value changes. So we're just doing exactly the same as we did on the other one, and we're just bringing these little fur lines in, just to sort of represent how the fur is sort of falling on these toes. Okay, Elizabeth, so some pencils are oil, some are wax, so you best to use one type under another. It does make sense. All pencils are made of the same ingredients, but in different quantities. So they all have an element of oil, they all have an element of wax, whether it's oil or wax. The manufacturers of pencils, their marketing details aren't always absolutely correct as to what's actually in the pencils. So what I tend to do now is, instead of calling them oil-based or wax-based, I tend to call them hard or soft. So my polychromos are hard and dry. My Pablos are hard and dry. My luminants are soft. Now, where have I put? Oh, here we go. My luminants are soft. Things like a Derwent drawing, very soft. You know, yeah. Oh, gosh, look at that. Yes, I've probably got more. There's probably a little bit more wax in there, but they all have an element of the same thing. I don't believe that there is an optimum or the correct way of laying down your pencils. I believe they can be mixed. Some pencils don't like to be mixed. And a lot of it is personal preference. So I use Derwent Lightfasts, just specific pencils quite a bit, but I find that they don't really like to be mixed that much with other pencils, particularly on drafting film. I feel they can actually pull pigment off, but that could very well be how I work. And somebody else might say, oh, I don't find them a problem at all. I think they're amazing with other pencils. So there isn't an optimum right or wrong way. However, there are certain techniques that I use that I think work really, really well. So if I'm using pastel mat, I tend, depending on the subject and the colours that I'm using, I tend to put down my hard, dry pencils first. And this is purely psychological. Because if you've worked on pastel mat before, you'll know it's a very grainy, toothy paper. And what happens when you put a hard, dry pencil down on pastel mat is, and if you use nice light pressure, your pencil lays on the top of the tooth. And because it's hard and dry, it's very easy to move the pigment that's on the tooth of the paper. It's very easy to move it around. So you could use a cotton bud to move it around. You could use another lighter coloured pencil to move it around. It's going to move around really nice and easily because it's more dusty. If you've got a very soft pencil, like a Holbein, like a Luminance, and you put that colour down first, it's much harder to move it around because it's a stickier, softer pencil and it sticks to the tooth. So if you then try and lift it out with a kneadable eraser, or you try and move it around, it's much harder to do it and it doesn't work quite as well. The end product doesn't matter a hoot whether you started with the luminance or whether you started with the polychromos, but it's how it's all about your motivation and how much you can take before becoming so frustrated with it all. And that's why I prefer to use a harder, drier pencil like a polychromos or a Pablo first, because I find it easier to maneuver the pencil marks than if I was using the luminance first. Saying that, if I'm drawing a light coloured animal on a white pastel mat, I very often start with my luminance first, because of course if you're using light colours on a light background, you can't see the tooth. So it's all about the tooth. It's all about psychology. It's nothing to do with pencils or anything like that. All to do with psychology. You know, and everybody's different. Some people have much higher levels of being able to cope with stuff. Other people don't. And I'm very much about enjoying what I do and loving the process. And I try not to get frustrated as much as I can, even though it does happen. You know, so there's little tips that you can, and everybody will have a different answer. You know, you go onto one of the colour pencil groups and you ask some of the other people who teach, they go, oh no, that you shouldn't do that. You should always do this and you should always do that. But everybody's different and it's what works for you. You know, that's another thing that I would never say either. I would never say that one person's technique you shouldn't use that. You should use one of mine. My thinking is that we should just do what works for us. I can advise and I can say, well, this has worked for me. If it doesn't work for you and you've got something that does work for you, that is what you should do. And that is perfect. Because at the end of the day, we ultimately are doing this to have a lovely time. You know, that I think, in fact, I'm pretty certain that's the reason why I love my drawing. I've never felt I needed time off from my drawing. I've never burnt out or anything like that, because I make sure that what I do, I just absolutely love it. You know, and I've been drawing for 7 years now, and I draw a lot. I've been drawing this morning. Then I went to go and see my mum, and then I'm drawing this afternoon, and then when I finish this, I'm drawing again because I absolutely love it. So okay, so this is coming on really nice. It is a little bit sketchy. It's maybe not, you know, maybe you'd want to spend more time on it and really start to you know, pull more realism out. But actually, this, you know, for a draw along, this is really nice to do. Do I ever use Prism Premiere? Vicky, I've literally bought a whole set of Prisma. I did have a whole set before, and I think I gave them away to one of my nieces. I have bought a whole set of Prisma. How exciting is that? It's in a box waiting for me. I'm very excited about it. I don't tend to use them a huge amount because they're a little bit too soft for me. But the reason I bought them is because I'm about to start my first portrait on drafting film. And if you've used drafting film before, you will know how flipping hard it is to get a smooth lay down. So I thought I'm just gonna buy all of the pencils and try them all and see what happens. I know that Prisma has got some super colours in for portraits. I also know that not all of them are light fast, and this is a portrait that I'm just doing for me. I just want to have a bit of a play around, really, see what happens. So yeah, I've got a whole set of 150 in the other room. How exciting is that? But I love my polychromos and my luminance. So have you ever almost completed a project and made an awful mistake? Yes. Yeah. So no, I never throw anything away. Usually what happens is, if I know I'm not going to get very far into a piece before I know I need to restart it. So I restarted the horse that I'm working on now, and I restarted it because I was really struggling to get the smooth lay down on the neck, and it just got to the point where I was just like, no, need to restart this and try something different. So I did that. Whenever I restart something, it's always a very conscious decision. It's never done in anger, and it's never done with me getting really frustrated with something. So I've never once ever ripped a piece of paper off my drawing board and chucked it in the bin, ever. Excuse me. It's always been a very conscious decision. I'm just going to come back in again with the sepia 10% here, and we're just going to start to bring the little shadows and everything in here. And I think that's quite an important thing to think about. You know, walk away from something. Half of the time, when we think something is going really badly, and we walk away and we come back, it's like, oh, it's not so bad actually. And it's also very dependent on the surface you're working on. So a pastel matte piece, I very rarely go wrong on a pastel matte piece because I just incorporate all my mistakes into the layers. When you're working on hot press, or when you're working on drafting film, you know, if something does go wrong, then it can be a little bit. But the other thing as well is, and I've done this with tutorials, I've just kept on going and shown the tutorial with everything going wrong, because it's a really, really good lesson as to how this has gone wrong and this is how we're going to rectify it, or this has gone wrong and I really need to make a decision to just completely, you know, restart it or think again. Let's have a look. How many hours do I draw a week? Okay, so I tend to start drawing if I've got a week where I don't have anything in the evening. So sometimes I have an art club, sometimes having an evening, or I might be going out or something like that. So a week where I don't have anything going on, I'll draw from 7 to 11 Monday through to Thursday. So 7, 8, 9, 10. So 4 hours a day. Friday is my day off, so I don't work on a Friday, as in I don't tend to have any meetings. You know, I sort of take it as my day off. Then what I will try and do is I'll go swimming, and then I usually start drawing probably around lunchtime, and I'll draw and I'll have a couple of breaks, but again I'll draw through to 11 on a Friday, and very similar on a Saturday and a Sunday. So I can do sort of like 7 or 8 hours Friday, Saturday, Sunday each day. You know, unless of course I've got something going on, which of course half of the time I have got something going on. But that's my drawing a lot. I'd like to draw more during the week, but I just don't get the chance. When I first started drawing, I had a full-time job, had horses, I had a husband at that point. And then I found it really hard to draw. So I actually started to sort of eat into my sleep time. So I'd probably start drawing around 8 o'clock in the evening, maybe even later sometimes, depending on what was going on. And I'd draw sort of up until probably about 2 o'clock in the morning. I'd draw. I just, you know, when you become so passionate about something that it's just all you can think about, and that a lot of the time that's how I am with my drawing. I absolutely love it, and it comes before, doesn't come before my family, but it comes before cleaning. Comes before everything, comes before cleaning. But yeah, I just absolutely love it. You know, and what's really, really nice now is, now that I've got the academy, and I'm not putting new tutorials on Patreon every month. So when I was doing Patreon, I had to have a new tutorial every single month. And once I decided I wasn't going to do that, oh my goodness, not that I got particularly stressed, but it was just such a relief not to have to think about, I've got to put a tutorial out. I've got to put a tutorial out. Because of course with the academy, there's new stuff going out every single week anyway. And I do tutorials, but that I don't necessarily have to get them out for the first of every month. And that is a massive relief for me. It really is. What size are my typical animal portraits? I'd probably say I like a 10 by 12, or maybe something a little bit bigger than that. And I don't love doing the massive ones, I have to say. The dog portrait that I just did, that was a half sheet of pastel mat. I don't love doing the big ones because they don't always fit beautifully on my drawing board. I think a 10 by 12 is a nice size. How do you avoid having your fur on a horse or a dog look like crosshatch situation? That's Broadway 789. It's how you use your pencil strokes. So if you're using your pencil strokes in a crosshatch, nothing wrong with that. There's some beautiful pieces that use crosshatching. But if you don't want the crosshatching, then don't do the crosshatching. It's all about how you lay your pencils down. Yes, that you can absolutely say that, Carrie. You may quote me on that. Add my name to it. Drawing comes before cleaning. It definitely does. Always does. Yeah. I'll swear by that. So just coming down here, I'm hoping to get a little bit more. We've got sort of like 20 minutes left. Hopefully you're going to join me next week as well. We're going to do the tiger's eye next week. If you can get drafting film or Duralar or Polydraw for next week, do, because it's a super surface to draw on. And we're going to be able to get some really, really nice marks, fur marks and everything in using the slice tool. Right, I'm just going to bring a little bit more down here on this sepia 10%. And then again, we're just going to bring some of those little nails in. It's amazing, you know, we haven't like put loads and loads of layers in this, but it's still looking nice, and they do look like nice little paws actually. You know, it's not, colour pencil is about the layering, you know, and if you're sort of drawing, if you know, with realism and everything, it definitely is about the layering, but sometimes you don't need all of the layers that you think you might need. What brand of, oh, I love that. Yeah, definitely a t-shirt idea. Yes, you can use an X-Acto knife. That's absolutely fine. Brand of drawing film, I use the graphics drafting film 0.005 double matte, but you can use the Duralar, and it's the one with the orange cover. You want the double matte. And you can use Polydraw, and Polydraw comes in a pad, and it's got a brown cover. Polydraw is much thinner. It feels a little bit scary when you use it, but actually it's a really, really nice thing to use. Right. Sorry. Let's just get these little claws in here. So for these ones, I want to bring a little bit of this cinnamon and a little bit of the burnt ochre into this, with some of that brown ochre and the walnut brown. Right, so let's start with the burnt ochre, the 187. And I'm just going to start with this one here. We're going to do that little one, but we'll start with this one here. And we're just going to go, it kind of goes up. Just going a little bit into there. A little bit on the outside. A little bit of the brown ochre. And then I'm just going to use the sepia 10% again. Just bring a little bit of that through there, so we've got the little sweepy bits of hair. Actually, I'm just going to use a little bit of that sepia 10% in there as well. That's probably a better colour to use. Get a little bit of a line in. And then let's use this one as well. So again, really watching the shape of it. Coming down there. So we've got that sort of slightly bowed shape there. And then I'm going to use that sepia 10% again in here. I think that was quite a good colour, just to get that shadow in. These are tiny little paws. You know, you might want to spend a little bit longer, maybe get a shine or something on them as well. And then let's just do this last one here. Okay, I'm going to use that sepia 10 on this side. And then a little bit of that walnut brown down the middle there. I'm just going to use that brown ochre 10% in there as well. And then just go back in again with the burnt ochre in there. Okay, a bit more of that burnt ochre in there. So the thing with smooth papers, you think, oh, it's nice and smooth, and then it's not. It's got tons of tooth in it, but actually it's not been too bad. And then I'm just going to use my sepia 10%. I'm just going to colour all of that in there. And then I'm going to use my walnut brown. Actually going to use a little bit of that in there as well, for that bit of shadow in there. Okay. And then I can use a little bit more of that walnut brown in there, not too hard. I want to keep the pressure nice and soft. And then I'm just going to come into that little crease here and get some of this dark in here. So harder pressure so we get that sort of depth in there. Okay, that's good. Let's get a little bit more value in there as well. And then I'm just going to use that sepia 10% again, just in here. And I'm just going to bring a little bit of that orangey colour into this top one here as well. So obviously we haven't put all of the value and everything down onto here. I've got that orange quite as dark as we need, but I think the important bit is the shadow and those little toes. So I'm glad we sort of concentrated on those. And I'm just going to come down and just glaze a little bit into the tops of these paws here as well. No. So my eldest son, he heads off to Australia tomorrow. So he's got a visa. He's planning on staying out there for a year, maybe 2, depends on what happens. He's actually a heating engineer. So he sort of fits people's boilers and deals with gas and all of that kind of stuff. My daughter is she works for an estate agent's, although she's on holiday at the minute. And then my youngest son is wanting to get an apprenticeship. He's only 19. He's wanting to get an apprenticeship as a carpenter or joiner. So he's just sort of looking for that at the minute. And in the meantime, he's sort of manager of a cafe, a little cafe in our local town. So he's quite sociable. He sings. My youngest is a really good singer. But yeah, none of them are sort of arty, if you like. Oh, this one wants to be a lot longer, doesn't it? That one wants to go up there a little bit. Not sure what happened to that. There we go. Let me just come back in again with that sepia 10%, and then let's just look at the shadow again down here. Do I ever use pencil blender? No. I had a terrible time with Zest It, and it's completely put me off using any kind of pencil blender. Zest It is it's supposed to be all natural. I've got the dark sepia here, and we're just going to start to lay a little bit more of this shadow in here. I'm going to go to quite dark to begin with in here because we need it to be dark. And anyway, it gave me a dreadful migraine that actually came out as stroke-like symptoms. So I couldn't speak. I could hardly function, and I will not have any of that horrible stuff anywhere near me ever again. It's the most awful stuff. And actually, I prefer just to use my pencils. I don't use anything apart from a cotton bud. I don't use anything to blend my pencils. So I just use pure pencils. You know, again, of course you can use Zest It. My thinking is learn how to use your pencils without it and then make a choice. you know, I think I'm very passionate about my pencils, and I see them as a really beautiful medium, and I don't see that, I don't see why people want to turn them into paints, but you know, each their own and everything. But I do think that people use blending things like that possibly because they don't realize they can actually use their pencils. So I would say if you're going to use it, use it, but do make sure that you understand the techniques and you can use the techniques where you don't need to use it. But I don't use it now. How do I get a shine on the claws? Well, so you could maybe use something like a little bit of a white. So you could not it's going to work particularly well on this, but you'd probably just leave a little bit of a gap. But to be honest, it's so small, not really going to be able to see it anyway. Oh, Donna, don't. Oh, honestly, don't feel bad about doing anything. Shout it to the world. What about colourless pencil blenders like the Luminance full blender? So I do occasionally use the Luminance full blender, but I'll use it actually on hot press paper so that I can use my slice tool rather than using it as a pencil blender. I've got a pencil blender here. Now, where is it? Hang on. Oh, it's here. So this is a Luminance one here. I don't know what, it's just called pencil blender. Quite frankly, I don't even know, it's useless. Maybe it's better on smooth paper, I don't know, but I wouldn't use those. I just use my pencils. You know, so yeah, you see, I don't really use blending pencils. I just use the pencils that I'm using. They tend to work really well. And of course, when I use pastel mat an awful lot of the time, and I use drafting film, and you can't use a pencil blend. Well, you can use a pencil blender on drafting film, but it doesn't give you the results that you think you're going to get. And obviously on pastel mat, you don't want to be pressing very hard. So you know, so I tend to not use anything like that. Just use my pencils, and they work pretty well. Okay, just going to bring, this is the dark sepia, just going to bring a little bit of this in here, and then I'm just going to use that little bit of a cotton bud just to darken this off here a little bit. And then I'm just going to use that warm grey 4 just in here. Darken this up a bit. So I'll just use that little bit of a cotton bud in there. Maybe I have to and then I can just use a little bit of that warm grey 4 just up here as well. Just bring a little bit of that shadow in there. Okay, right, so walnut brown, I just want to bring this little bit of that little bit of like a dew claw or whatever through into there. And just darken this bit here because there's a slight shadow in there as well. It's the walnut brown that I'm using here. So you could use like a slice tool or something like that. I'm not sure how the slice tool works with this particular paper, but you could use something like that. If you've been using Luminance, then it will tend to work. If you haven't been using luminance, then it probably won't. Just darken these up a little bit actually, and then the shine will kind of come out a bit more with that walnut brown. This one here, I think. And then I just need to get these slightly darker in there. And then I'm just going to use the that dark sepia. Just a little bit more down here, so we've got that sort of slightly darker shadow in there. You can see I'm just kind of going round and round, just getting a bit of an idea of a shadow in. But going in light to begin with, I think it gives you a little bit more confidence that you know that it's in the right place, and then you can just gradually darken it up. So I've got that kind of coming around there. Okay. And then I'm just going to use that little cotton bud again. A little bit roughly, but it's going to give us an idea. And then we have a couple of quite nice little paws, I think. Some relatively simple techniques. That doesn't mean that you've got to spend hours and hours and hours, sort of trying to get perfect fur techniques. Concentrate on the texture. And yes, that might mean that you kind of looks like you're drawing every single hair, but it isn't really. It's just about concentrating on the texture. Be very, very specific around when you're drawing your hairs in. How long are your hairs? If you're drawing say you're drawing a black Labrador again, and you draw long hairs, you're going to get a Labrador that looks like he's got long hair. So you've got to be very careful about the length of your hairs relative to the breed of dog. Oh, I draw very fast. Yeah, well, I guess I don't think it's that I draw very fast. I think it's just that my technique is a little bit sketchy, and actually losing the trying not to be perfect is a really, really brilliant way of developing your drawing skills. If you try and put everything in the right place and you're perfect, you're going to struggle in developing your pencil skills, and you're going to get really frustrated as well. So oh gosh, I'm sure it doesn't. Have you got your tea? No, I'm not drinking tea. I've got my water here. Yeah. So yeah, just nice, simple little techniques. And then you can take these techniques and then you can start to build them and build them and build them. So if you were drawing, a horse, you'd really look at the length of the hair, you'd look at the structure of the hair, you'd look at whether it was sort of had a lot of texture in the fur or whether it was very smooth. The thing that we really need to concentrate on the most are those values and those little tiny value changes. We've got some nice values in here, and obviously we've got the little bits of the shadow in there as well. So yeah, I think that's been a really nice afternoon drawing, I have to say. Yes, perfectionism is the total and utter, it's the thief of joy. It really is. If you end up feeling that you have to get everything perfect, the majority of the time you'll find that nothing is good enough. And for me, that's so sad. I want to be able to sit down and draw these quick little paws with you guys for 2 hours and go, do you know what? I really like those. I think they're great. If I was drawing these on my own, I'd maybe take 10 hours to draw them rather than 2. But sometimes it's quite nice to do something that's a little bit more looser and, you know, doesn't take as long. So thank you all ever so much for joining me this afternoon. Hopefully I'll see some of you next Sunday. Same time, same place, but we're drawing tiger eyes on, or a tiger eye on drafting film. This will be winging its way to you tomorrow, I think. So, oh gosh, my voice is completely going now. Thank you all ever so much for joining me this afternoon. And yeah, I'll see you all very soon. Bye.